Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Cyrus Web Presents here in the beautiful city of Chicago, Illinois. I'm so excited to be sitting down with my friend Dan Burns today. This is a pretty big day for Dan because he celebrated the release of his new book that you guys see there called Grace. We're going to be talking to Dan not only about the new book, but also about his love of storytelling, what it's been like for him to share that with all of you, and of course, let you guys know how to get your own copy of the book and stay connected with him. Dan, thank you so much for this. Really appreciate it.
It's so great to see you. We've talked for so many years on the phone. To see you in person, it's quite a treat. And thanks for squeezing me in.
Well, no, I thank you for the opportunity because you are, and I said this on a post, I think on Facebook yesterday, you are such a gift for readers like myself because you're able to create these stories, Dan, that I think people are able to not only enjoy, but I think, like with Grace, able to see themselves in. So what has it been like for you as a storyteller to do what you love and see the response?
You know, it's an unbelievable opportunity to just every day have fun and explore ideas and explore writing not only opportunities, but trying different things. I think that's probably what I try to pursue the most with this book, in that you've read my other books, and they're kind of all unique and different in their own way. Right. And I not only with each book try and make it better than the last one, but also to try different approaches to storytelling. Right. And this was certainly the case with Grace. I think what I was really trying to explore was how to look at telling the story from different perspectives. Most of all of my other stories and novels were told from the kind of the third person omniscient point of view, which is a very safe way to tell a story. But you can never really tell the true thoughts and feelings of a character, because how all-knowing can you be?
Sure.
And so with the opening story, Redemption, and two others in this collection, I took the first-person perspective and really dove into the mind of the character. And it was enlightening and invigorating and exciting, and I was able to say things from the character's perspective that I don't think I've ever said before. And so the stories came across much differently. I think readers are going to be surprised, excited, interested, and engaged just because of the difference in perspective.
You mentioned a really good point here, Dan, because I will say this, and I finished the book actually in my trip to Chicago. And one thing that I will say about this book is that this book is us. This book is, I think that's maybe the connection people will feel, is that they will see pieces of themselves in this. And I think that's the gift that you've given us as a storyteller with the first person narrative, because you allow us to see that we are more connected sometimes than maybe we might think. I mean, what was that like for you to explore as the stories came together, the fact that here you were creating these characters, but really are telling the stories of so many people?
You know, it's I thought was most interesting is as I was pulling the stories together for the collection, that they were all thematically connected. And that wasn't intentional as I was writing each individual story, because I wrote them over several years at different periods of my life and from different perspectives. And so when I read them and saw that they were all thematically connected through kind of personal, and I think you make that point that people will recognize themselves in these characters.
Right.
I saw that myself, and again, it's magical when you write, because you write a story and then afterwards all sorts of other things come to you that you didn't intend in getting across to the reader. And then when you get the reader perspective, which is subjective and enlightening, it's really fascinating. So I'm looking forward to hearing how people react to the stories and seeing themselves in these characters. And I think there's a lot to draw from these stories.
There is. And I think that's part of the great thing about being a storyteller, right? That you're able to present this to us, and then of course let the audience be able to see what they're able to connect with. You mentioned something about Grace that you've also been able to do with your previous work, Dan, and that is to be able to draw from things over the years as your own journey as a storyteller. So what has it been like for you to look at your own growth, to look at where you were when you were creating these stories and to look at where you were now?
I think the first thing is, one of the stories I wrote 3 years ago. And to reread it again, the first impression is, where did that come from? And who was I, at that time?
Yeah.
And I can then go back and recall, where I was and kind of where I'm at today, which is in a very different place. But I don't change the stories because all of my stories are as a point in time. It's the storytelling from my perspective at that point in time, given my experience up until that point in time, and it marks kind of history for myself as a writer. And then again, with each new one, if I can make it a little bit better and approach it a little bit differently and make it more interesting, even better. One of the things I'd like to mention, the last story, which is the title novella, Grace, that started as a poem. And if I could just tell the quick story,
definitely, sure.
I showed it my office one morning, and I'm about to open the door to my office, and I look down, and my neighbor is having difficulty getting his key in the lock. It seems he'd had a rough night. And on the third attempt, the key hits the deadbolt keyhole, and he stumbles into his apartment. And I sat down, and I was working on a story from the day before, and I could not stop thinking about this guy and where had he come from and what was he doing? And I figured he'd have some, explaining to do. And so I sat down and I wrote a poem that kind of helped me explore what he was going through at that time. And that started this steamroller effect of ideas. And it went from a poem to a short story to a stage play, a script, which I hope to see on a Chicago stage sometime soon, into the novella that is in the book.
Wow.
And when you ask about development as a writer and where stories come from, they can come from anywhere and they can grow organically over time. Sometimes the ideas just do not let me alone.
Wow.
And leave me alone, and I have to explore it further. And Grace, in particular, when you made the comment that people will see themselves in these characters, there's a lot of characters in that novella, and I think people will be able to identify with not only one, but many of the people, not only as themselves, but people they know, people in their family. And I think it's just a glorious story that I think will make people laugh and maybe cry and maybe be shocked as well. Right. The ending is quite interesting, I think.
Well, you brought up something. I want to talk to you. I mentioned before we began the segment with Dan, I want to talk to him about the association, pun intended there, of individuals you've been able to surround yourself with that are also creatives. But you said something just now that I definitely want to go back to, because this is something I didn't know about you and your work, that you don't change the stories. And what I thought about when you said it, it was almost like history, right? History is what it is. And we might, like it or, be able to add to it, but it is what it is. I mean, is that just a conscious decision you made to just say that this is what I wanted to write at that time, and I'm going to honor that and honor those characters and where they were?
Absolutely. And as I mentioned, it marks that history, that point in history in my life. And I need to leave it be. I could go back and edit and change all the stories I've written.
Yeah.
But there's so much more to work on, so many new ideas and stories to tell. So I'm going to leave those, where they're at. Gotcha. And kind of take it from there.
Well, for those who are just tuning in, no matter what platform you may be joining us, whether it's our TV program or through our web series and other platforms, you're watching Cyrus Represents, sitting down with my good friend, author Dan Burns, our very first in-person conversation together. We've been a guest on the radio show Conversations Live several times. We're meeting for the first time here in Chicago to discuss his career and his brand new book. You guys see it there, called Grace. We're going to be letting you all know how you can get your own copy of the book and stay connected with Dan as well. So then let's talk about, this group that you've been able to form, because I think what's so interesting is I think we need to have people around us to support us,
Absolutely.
but also who understand the process and what we go through. You've been able to do that with fellow authors as well. Why has that been so important for you?
Well, I mean, as a writer, it's a very solitary endeavor, right? We lock ourselves in our room. We try and get the words down onto the page, and then when we're done, what do we do with it? Where do we go? And I think it's very important that we have friends, fellow authors, family members, whoever, to talk to about our writing and our stories. And so when we saw each other yesterday at the Chicago Writers Association event. This is a group, I'm on the board. It's the largest writers association in the Midwest. We have close to 1,000 members across the country. But the most important part of it is that it is a group of people that have the ability to get together and share their experiences in a variety of ways, whether it's in person at events, education events, online, however. It's critically important. Just to share a recent experience I had with the book, my biggest concern is that it be perfect when it gets out. And so editing is tremendously important as part of the publishing process. And once it was ready to go to print, I asked my fellow Chicago Writers Association friends if they would be interested in being advanced readers. And 20 people immediately responded, like within an hour. And I took everyone up on it. And they all spent the time to read the book and share their personal comments about how to make it better. Not how to change it, not a critique, but how to make it better for publication. And where do you get that? When you're a writer sitting in your office,
Exactly.
You can't get that. So thank you again to all of my friends at Chicago Writers Association who helped make the book perfect, and I am indebted to you. But if you're a writer and you're looking for support and inspiration and fellowship, you might consider joining us at the Chicago Writers Association. And that website is chicagowrites.org.
Right, and we'll make sure we link that up at the end as well.
Thank you.
Dan, I want to go to something else about that, because one thing at the event that I attended yesterday, again, something I was afraid to say I was going to be able to come because I didn't know if I was going to be able to make it. But I was so glad, because one thing I sat in the very back, and it was so interesting to watch people of different ages come together, but to come together to support the written word. And I think that is one of the beautiful things about what books are able to do. How does that feel to know that you've been able to find people around this country who appreciate what you've been able to put on paper?
It's unbelievable. It's hard to put it into words. Oftentimes as a writer, you write for yourself. To get the words down onto the page and prevent yourself from going nuts. The ideas are there, you have to get them down. But to think that someone else, whether it's one person or 1,000, whether it's in Chicago or in California, New York, is interested in reading my book and then taking the time to get back to me and sharing their perspective and thoughts and ideas, it's incredible. It's humbling, and I appreciate every single one of the readers that plunks down their hard-earned money to read my books, because it means everything. It means the world to me. And again, I mentioned before, and it's worth mentioning again. Reading is a subjective activity, right? These are just stories, words on the page, flat characters, but each individual reader will interpret that story their own way.
This is true.
And to hear that feedback of how a story impacted somebody and what it meant to that person is incredibly enlightening. And it makes me think about, was that my intention? Or maybe that was something stuck in my subconscious that I wasn't even thinking of, that I snuck in there and that person caught it. Anyway, it's incredible, the relationship between writer and reader.
And the reader, right. And we definitely want you all to be able to take advantage. Again, everyone, Dan Burns has been our guest Grace, a great title. You guys will definitely enjoy the story as well as the short stories involved in this. It's available through our friends at Amazon.com, of course. And Dan, how can our audience stay connected with you?
Check out my website at www.danburnsauthor.com, and feel free to like my Facebook page, Dan Burns Author, to keep up on all the activities and all the exciting things that are coming up. I will mention, a lot of people love the print book. It's available in hardcover and softcover, also available as an ebook. And for you audiobook lovers, it's coming out Tuesday.
Wow.
Narrated by Mark Bramhall, who is just fantastic. And if you love the audiobook, and I'll say even if you don't or haven't tried it, what a great companion to the book to hear Mark bring these characters to life. He is an award-winning narrator, an actor by trade, and he really brings these stories to life.
Wow.
What a
Something
great
to look forward
experience.
to. And make sure you guys do check out chicagorights.org as well,
Yes.
to be able to stay connected with the association. Dan, thank you so much for this.
Thanks so
I really
much. Great to
appreciate
see you.
this. And we thank your audience for tuning in to this edition of Cyrus Webb Presents.